too glamorous.
I was going to say, we all felt pretty good when we came on, and then you just walked on and, you know.
Thank you so much.
You look fantastic.
Thank you.
So you're here to talk about your new memoirs, which is Transitional.
Yes.
How difficult was this to write? Because I know it took you 4 years.
Yeah, it did. It was a really tough story to tell. Like a lot of trans people in the UK, it's a very toxic environment that we're navigating right now, and it's steadily gotten worse over the past 5 years, which is really the time when I've been writing the book. So it's been a balance of trying to fight for my community, trying to fight for myself, you know, live, and also write this book. And it's taken different guises, you know. Firstly, it was much more theory-based. Second time I wrote it, it was much more personal, and then I put it all together, and this is it. It's out tomorrow.
And when you say it's got worse, Munroe, what do you mean over the last 5 years? Because some people would hope that we would have been making progress.
Yes, and I think there's a lot of toxic debate, and trans people are often not asked, you know, what it's like to be trans. There's so much misinformation going around about trans people being in women-only spaces, when legally we've been allowed to use whatever spaces are in alignment with our gender identity since 2010 with the Equality Act. So the talking points don't reflect the law, and it's just becoming increasingly difficult, from healthcare to mental health, to access to housing and employment, homelessness. There's so many issues that the trans community are facing, but none of it gets any airtime because it's constantly going around the same old things, which are so silly. You know, we all use gender neutral toilets on airplanes and, you know, in television studios, and it's just very silly. There's no statistics to say that trans women are a threat to anybody, yet as we have seen this week, trans people are at risk and are in danger and, you know, paying with our lives. It's
they are
really
much more at risk than they are the danger.
Well,
of course.
And we've seen it all before with how gay men were talked about in the 1980s and 90s and before that as well. And it doesn't end well, you know, when we're constantly talking about pushing people out and stopping people from accessing what they need, it results in people dying. So this is what this book is about. It's about what I have been through in my own personal journey, but rooting it within society so that people can not make the same mistakes again.
This is what I was going to actually talk to you about, because I've followed your work for many, many years. And as an activist, you've been at the forefront, but you've taken a heck of a lot of blows from the media to, you know, sort of violence as well against yourself personally. I was just going to ask, you know, what was probably the lowest moment within those years, those primary years of sort of coming out and feeling ostracized in the way that you were?
There was a really difficult time in the book, and I still find it quite difficult to talk about, so sorry if I stammer. But I was sexually assaulted right at the beginning of my transition, and this is something, again, that a lot of trans women encounter, because society demonizes our bodies so much to the point where those men who find us attractive think that it's so wrong that they'll do it in secret and often enact, you know, sexual violence on us. And I was locked in a room for 2 hours and raped, and I was stalked for 6 months before I met him on a night out, and then he found where I lived and where I worked, and raped me very badly, and it just set me on a really dark trajectory because there was no help. And then socially, culturally, things have just gotten worse, and we're being painted as the people who you should be looking out for, when really we're all being affected by misogyny and violence against women.
We are,
so
absolutely.
It's really important. It's really important that all women stand together, and that, you know, I fight for your causes, you fight for mine, because if we're divided, then it just keeps happening. And, you know, trans women are not a threat to anybody. If there was elevated violence coming from my own community, I'd be the first person to stand with cis women, but it's not a thing. It's just an unfounded fear.
Would you like to see more trans women come out and speak up? for
I
themselves.
think that, no one should come out unless they're ready.
Yeah.
But I would love to see more trans people doing things that have nothing to do with being trans.
Yes.
Like a transgender gardening show host.
Yeah.
Or, I think it's amazing. We saw Kim Petras win a Grammy. And, she's a singer. She's been celebrated for her talent.
Well, I was going to say to you that I did a sitcom a few years ago for the BBC too, called Boy Meets Girl with Rebecca Root, a trans actress, still a great friend of mine. And that was very important, we heard, to the trans community because, and I've heard you say before, trans people are just normal people trying to live a normal life. And that's what the sitcom showed, that her being trans was just one of many problems faced within a family. And because it was done in a comedy, but the comedy wasn't directed at the trans character, it was at the family, we had wonderful letters, emails about trans people who had come out to their parents because they said if they'd watched it in a documentary, their mother or father might not have wanted to watch it. But because it was in a comedy and it normalised it. So I understand totally what you're saying. There should be more of that. The humanisation.
Being a woman, being a person, being
a trans man, being whatever,
It's really important that we just stop seeing this as something that is so different. And this book, I really hope that all sorts of people read it, that, really people need to understand that trans people are daughters, we're people's sisters, friends, lovers, we have full lives.
And hopefully a mum one day?
Well, I would love to. Yeah, that's one of my dreams, I'm often asked, like, what are my dreams? And I think a lot of people expect me to talk about, professional things.
Well, people think success is professional and it's personal as much as anything.
Exactly. I think, I really want a big family, and I come from a small family, so I want a big one. And I also want to give opportunity to kids who need fostering and mentoring. And I'm a patron of a trans kids charity called Mermaids, who get a lot of flack in the press.
I know they do.
And it's disgusting. I really want people to think about where this transphobia is coming from. And unfortunately, we have a government who is on the wrong side of history. And we shouldn't have a prime minister who isn't advocating for all of his citizens. And we're really seeing.
What's next for you in your career? You've achieved so much. It's
and it's all really unexpected. I mean, it's really against the odds. I mean, to be a contributing editor at British Vogue is an absolute dream, because I was in the toilets at school reading British Vogue because I had no friends. That was that was like my lunchtime. But to now be, mentored and be a friend of Edward Enninful, the editor-in-chief, who's like the most incredible man. Like, shout out to Edward for supporting me, and also for being such an ally to the community. Can I also just say before we finish, I'm such a big Eternal fan. Kelly.
We all are.
I had Kelly's posters on my wall when I was a kid, so I just wanted to get that in.
Well, Munroe, I was your friend till then. I used to be in a girl band. No, it's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Munroe Bergdoff, Transitional. It's the most fantastic read. Good luck with all of it.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you. It's out tomorrow.